Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our main Fire Authority meeting. It's good to see everybody, and hopefully you all managed to find somewhere to park. And it's not too many miles away, unlike mine, but we'll gloss over that. That's the start. Anyway, I'll start by reminding people that when you do speak, please remember to use your microphone. It's a big hall, and it's quite difficult to hear people back there, and also for the purposes of the recording, you need to be using your microphone. And please also remember to turn it off when you're finished, because that helps too. Right, so just going down through the agenda, we have some apologies for absence. We have Councillors Ali, Brown, Butters, Goggin and May, and also James Mason, who's our independent person. And I'll now hand over to the Chief Fire Officer to confirm the emergency evacuation procedures.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members and members of my team and members of the public. Evacuation procedures here. Obviously, we're in a fairly strange place. It's not a place that we're familiar with. We're not expecting a fire alarm this afternoon. So if the fire alarm does sound, we will make our way out to the nearest fire exit. They are marked with a green run-in man sign signal. And once we've exited the nearest exit, we'll meet in the main car park where we'll do a roll call. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And moving on to declarations of interest, I've got under item 12 the annual review of remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Exec Officers, SLB and statutory officers who've all declared an interest in this item. Has anybody else got any interest that they need to declare? No, doesn't look like it.
Chair, in relation to that paper, I have to present it, but I have an interest in it, yeah. So I apologise for that, but I am declaring an interest.
Thank you. Okay, we have under public access, item 4, we have one public access statement which has been received from Miss Jenny Gwynn, and that will be read by the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So, public access statement to Avon Fire Authority, 30th of March by Jenny Gwynn. I will read verbatim from the letter. If, as appears to be the case, no capital programme expenditure update for the year 31st of March 22 has been presented to any AFA committees since the 8th of October 2021 report to the PRSC with figures up to 31st of August, this is not a good position from which to be being asked to approve significant increases to various project costs the following years. The October report predicted actual spend to match the budget in 21-22, so presumably that is the assumption that the proposed capital budget presented today is based on. Avon Fire are continuing to spend heavily on capital assets, which seems concerning given the habitual complaints of how financially stretched they are, even with all the savings that are reported. On that subject, it would be nice for the public to know on what basis, in an exempt item, so a matter hidden from public scrutiny, the AFA approved Avon Fire Management's decision to sell a residential property worth $250,000 for $125,000. Now, Avon report they might not even get the proceeds until a few years after the sale. I find it shocking and perplexing that with $430,000 and $440,000 already approved, brackets, and presumably spent, brackets, on pre-construction costs for new stations at Weston-super-Mare and Bath respectively, Avon Fire Management are now seeking approval for another $500,000 and $50,000 respectively to spend on pre-construction and are still looking for sites for WSM, that's Weston-super-Mare, with the Bath project seemingly very undecided too. And it seems strange that the river design stages reportedly completed for both were done with no site chosen, as this seems to be a requirement for this work to take place. And this with the already approved capital expenditure for the actual construction of these new stations having been removed from the capital programme, with mention of business cases to follow, and what seems suggestions that the building of these two new stations, having been planned for years, may not go ahead after having spent such huge amounts. Presumably, a business case for the rebuilding of these stations was previously presented and approved before the AFA approved the capital expenditure to rebuild them. I would have expected the business case to have been re-examined when the total expected cost of rebuilding Avonmouth, Bath and Weston-super-Mare stations ballooned from 14 million to 20.3 million in February 2020. But no, the AFA seemed to approve this massive increase with virtually no explanation of the reasons and not even a breakdown of how these increased costs were split between the stations. The current report presented seems to suggest that the 18 million capital receipt from the sale of Templeback HQ land, reported for years to be funding these rebuilds, has in the meantime been used to fund just the new Avonmouth station and other capital expenditure, with nothing remaining by March 2023. I understand why Avon uses cash balances to avoid borrowing costs, but this does perhaps suggest capital spending should be more economical. How about starting that today? It does not seem clear what other assets the AFA is being asked to approve capital expenditure for. There is an increase in other premises expenditure totalling 2.28 million reported. The breakdown only includes 0.8 million of this, including 100k to be spent improving the supposed to be being rebuilt Bath Station. Presumably the other 1.5 million is to be spent with solar sense on unspecified items. In April last year, PRSC received delegated authority to approve a £3 million contract with SolarSense, with only 626k of this relating to the government-funded public sector decarbonisation scheme grant. Avon's management seemed to argue that the additional 2.4 million was for non-specified future spending and avoided having contracts that it might not want to go ahead with, and presumably no competitive process. Regarding vehicles, apparently Avon are buying the, as they quote, double the cost, energy-efficient ancillary vehicles, but it is not clear whether the capital programme also includes electric appliances. Avon have a video on COP26 YouTube saying they will be trialling electric fire engines. I wonder if the AFA believe it can be justified to spend double on such appliances, given their extremely low mileage as compared to buses or haulage vehicles, for example, and the level of impact on the environment. Also, I understand that emergency vehicles are exempt from clean air zone rules. Of the 1.5 million current budget for Bedminster refurbishment, 400k has already been spent, but the reports presented today took of approval of the business case and contract not yet having been given by the AFA, and now an additional 300k is being sought. Shouldn't the AFA be concerned about the level of spending on pre-construction costs, nearly 1 million proposed for just Weston-super-Mare? The above amounts for Bedminster are in addition to the 45k included as expenditure in 2017-18 by way of a provision against accounting regulations, by the way, and notes to Avon's accounts which state that repairs are recorded when they are incurred. This was treated as repairs rather than capital expenditure and apparently related to the floor, failing shortly after improvement works had been done a few years ago. By 31st March 2021, 222k had been spent, leaving a balance of 203k of this remaining unspent. So, in response to this public access statement, Avon Fire Authority wished to thank Ms Gwynne for her public access statement, and the statement will be read by the Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. As members will be aware, it has been agreed that capital reporting will come to the Fire Authority twice a year. As per the forward plan, the in-year capital position was reported to the Authority in October 21, and the end-of-year report will come to the June 22 meeting. The latter is linked to the Fire Authority's 21-22 final accounts process, which includes both revenue and capital. In addition, papers on significant capital expenditure come to the Authority for decisions in public or exempt papers, depending on their content. As per the Constitution, the capital programme is also regularly reported to and scrutinised by the PRSC, with that committee last reviewing the position in January 22 and due to review the latest position at their next meeting in April 22. In addition, members will be aware that there is a strategic member engagement forum where the development of and the progress with the service's core strategies and associated capital programme is discussed with members. If members would find it helpful, it is suggested a further briefing on the specific matters being referred to in the public access statement can be provided to the PRSC at their next meeting in April, and then on to all Authority members. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only public access statement we have received. And I'd now like to move on to Chair's business, and Just to confirm that this meeting is taking place as a face-to-face meeting, as unfortunately, due to the continuing prevalence of COVID-19, we continue to have room capacity restrictions and we've had to limit the number of attendees. So for this reason, as you will be aware, we are recording this meeting for the public to view. I'd now like to start by firstly asking members to introduce themselves, then I'll go on to officers. So, right, Don, would you like to start?
Yeah, hi, I'm Don Davis, Vice Chair and also Councillor from North Somerset.
Yeah, Councillor Brian Hopkinson, District Councillor for South Gloucestershire, Charlton Hayes and Cribs.
Councillor Chris Windows, Councillor for Henbury and Brentford.
Councillor Yasin Mahmood, Lawrence Hill, Bristol City Council.
Councillor John Ash, South Gloss Council, representing Bradley-Stoke South.
Councillor Richard Eddy, Bishopswood, Bristol.
Richard Tucker, North Somerset Council, Weston-super-Mare Milton.
Councillor Shelley Bromley for Western and Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Adam Monk, Councillor for South Gloss Council, representing the Filton Ward.
Councillor Ben Nutland, South Gloucestershire Council, representing Yate North.
Councillor David Wilcox from Lockleys, which is in Bristol.
Robert Payne, Councillor for Weston-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council.
Andrew Brown, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward in Bristol.
Councillor Ruth Jacobs, North Somerset Council.
I forgot to turn the microphone off. I failed already. I'm Councillor Brenda Massey. I'm Councillor for Southmead, as well as the Chair of the Fire Authority. So, can I now ask officers to introduce themselves? We go around the same way.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm Mick Crennell. I'm the Chief Fire Officer and Chief Exec of Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good afternoon, I'm Angie Feeney, the Director of Corporate Services.
Good afternoon, Vaughan Jenkins. I'm currently Area Manager within the Service Transformation Team.
Tanya Nathan, Procurement and Supplies Manager.
Good afternoon, Pete Davis. I'm the Service Liaison Officer with Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services.
Good afternoon, I'm Amber Foreman, Head of Corporate Communications.
Good afternoon, I'm Jane Williams-Locke, Deputy Director of Corporate Services. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Beth Allen, I'm Community Risk Management Planning Coordinator.
Good afternoon, Sean Spearing, Avon Fire and Rescue Service, Group Manager, Risk Management.
Afternoon, Annabelle Harford, Environmental Manager.
Good afternoon, Andy Cunningham, Chair of the Local Pension Board.
Good afternoon, Danny O'Neill, Treasurer to the Fire Authority.
Good afternoon, members, colleagues. Simon Shilton, one of the Assistant Chief Fire Officers.
Good afternoon, Amanda Brown, the Clerk to Avon Fire Authority.
Right, thank you for that. And I'll just remind you that voting, if it's required, will take place as follows. I will ask members for any votes against, any abstentions, and then a show of hands for all members voting for. Okay. Now, the next matter of business is something a bit different. And I know, I'm sure you're all aware, that this is Mick's last meeting, which he's probably saying, hooray, no more.
No, I think everyone else is.
So, on behalf of the Fire Authority, Mick, I just wanted to say a few words about your time here with us as Chief Fire Officer and Chief Executive of Avon Fire and Rescue Service. And I think everybody will remember that when you joined the service, we were going through quite a dark period with a lot of challenge and difficulty. But you stepped up, and you steered the ship around. And it wasn't very long before your leadership shone through, making your mark on the service for the better. You have been a truly inspirational leader during your time as Chief Fire Officer, and ultimately you were there for the service in its time of need. You've led the service on a journey, and the improvements made are testament to your leadership, passion and dedication to make Avon Fire and Rescue Service a better place for all those you work with and for the communities we serve. Personally, I'd like to thank you for your support as Chair of the Fire Authority, and I know others within the room will also be very grateful for the relationships that have been forged over these past few years. We thank you for your openness, your honesty at all times, your constructive challenge to make sure together and collectively we ensure that Avon Fire and Rescue Service delivers the standard of service local people in the area have come to expect. So all that remains for me to say is that we wish you and your family a very happy, healthy and prosperous retirement, with no doubt many more adventures to come. But before we get to that, I've also got something I would like to present to you. Thank you. Which is your certificate for 30 years meritorious service.
Thank you, Chair. I'm both humbled and honoured. Yes, it's been an experience for sure. Come to the last couple of days of my career, 30 years in public service is significant for sure. And I think it becomes part of your DNA. When you're in public service, you stay in public service. And for me, having served 30 years in service from firefighter through to Chief Officer, I'm very proud of that.
Thank you.
It's a bit dusty in here. It's also been an honour and a privilege to serve as your Chief Officer, but I haven't done that alone. I've done it with a fantastic team around me from everywhere in our service. Everybody, every day, is working hard to do two things. One is to keep our community safe, and the other is to make our service stronger. And wherever anybody works in our service, that's what they do every single day. I've also had a wonderful team around me on our board, a really strong team of committed individuals who are top of their game, as are all of our heads of service and our service leadership team. Just a wonderful group of people to work with. So it's been an honour and a privilege for me to do that and to serve as your Chief Officer. I hand over to Simon. Is Dusty and our team for the future, and I know they'll be in very, very good and very, very safe hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've also got somebody else who's leaving us today, and that will be Councillor Chris Windows. I think you probably haven't done 30 years here, but I'm sure it's quite a long time, Chris. So, sorry? Well, I'm referring to that, to the certificate, but I'm not sure that you've done 30 years on the Fire Authority. Yeah. It may feel like it at times, I'm sure. But thank you very much for your service, and we wish you very well for the future as well. So thank you.
To work with our uniformed members, and I start at the top with that and then proceed downwards. I should be sorry not to be involved anymore, but I promise to watch your progress, all of you, very carefully. So, thank you, Chief, and good luck to our new Chief as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. Right, moving on to more business. The next fire authority will be the AGM and will take place on the 22nd of June. So for those unitary authorities who are having elections, that was likely to be where you nominate potentially new members to join the fire authority. A new members induction event will take place for new members on the 9th of June. Right, moving on. The service has carried out a review of potential impacts to the supply chain caused by the Ukraine-Russia conflict. The service has no direct links to the Russian suppliers, and in line with agreed sanctions, will carry out additional due diligence to ensure any contracts are not awarded to suppliers linked with Russia. In solidarity with our fellow firefighters in Ukraine, we have donated a significant amount of redundant kit and equipment to assist our fire service family colleagues in the Ukraine. The donation, which included stretchers, a generator and firefighting PPE and clothing, formed part of a large UK fire and rescue services convoy that departed for the Ukraine on the 19th of March. And can I say I'm really pleased to hear that, because in Bristol Council we've been doing a lot of collections as well, so that's great news. Next, I would like to say congratulations to the 3 Avon Fire colleagues who were recently included in the 137 most influential women in Bristol list as part of International Women's Day. Annabelle Harford, Environment Manager, and Angie Feeney, Director of Corporate Services, who are both at today's meeting. Anna James, Watch Manager at Western Fire Station, was also nominated. So congratulations. Right, I think that concludes Chair's business. I don't think I've forgotten anything, but right, moving on. So the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Avon Fire Authority held on the 11th of February this year. I move they're a correct record. Anybody second it? Thank you, Richard. Everybody happy they're correct? Yes? Great, thank you. Oops. Right, in that case, we'll move on to the minutes of the committee meetings, and the first one is item 7.1, the ordinary meeting of the People and Culture Committee on the 17th of September last year. I think Councillor Wilcox is moving that. Sorry, I forgot which side of the room you were on. You're moving those, and everybody's happy they're correct record. Thank you.
I've had no objections.
Great. The next one is the committee minutes of the ordinary meeting of the People and Culture Committee on the 10th of December 2021.
I'd like to move those as well, please.
Yeah. And would somebody like to second that, please? Thank you. And everybody's happy they're correct? Yeah. Great. Committee minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Audit, Governance and Ethics Committee held on the 24th of November 2021. I believe Councillor Butters is going to move those.
Sent his apologies.
He sent his
Chair.
apologies. Oh.
So if we can have another member of the committee. So we have Councillors Ash, Brown, Butters, Goggin, Tucker and Wilcox were all present. So if one of those could propose, that would be helpful.
I'll move those as well then.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilcox.
And a seconder, please.
Tucker. Councillor Tucker.
Councillor Tucker, right. Thank you. Okay, our next one is the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee on the 8th of October 2021. I think Councillor Payne is moving those.
Yes, happy to move that, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. Right, that's great. Right, and moving on to the next one is the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Local Pension Board held on the 3rd of September 2021. And Councillor Windows, you'd like to move those?
Yes.
Thank you.
I so move.
Thank you. And a seconder? Anybody? Yeah, thank you. Good. Right. Okay, that's, I think, concludes all our meeting minutes to be done. Seems a long time ago, 2021, doesn't it? Right. In that case, we move on to items for decision, and the first one is approval of the final service plan, including integrated risk management plan, and I think Simon and Jane Williams-Locke and Amber Foreman are presenting these.
I think Simon Shilton will go first.
Yes, fine. Thank
you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon again, members. So, members, in front of you today you have a paper which makes two recommendations. The first recommendation is consider the outcomes of the public consultation and, subject to those approvals, approve the service plan for 2022 to 2025 for publication. By way of a reminder, members, the service plan sets out your strategic aims and objectives in how we deliver our key objectives, those being making our communities safer, and we do that through preventing, protecting, responding and providing a resilient service, and also how we make our organisation stronger, either through investing in our service and investing in our people. And final objective within the service plan is around how we are transforming our service and the various elements that we are approving internally with our IT infrastructure, our policies and our procedures. So, members, our service plan is, in essence, two documents in one. It identifies the risk profile of our service and our service area, which in essence identifies who, what, why, where and when somebody is at risk from fire or other serious incident, and then sets out how we are going to address and minimise the risk that members of our community and visitors to our service area may well be exposed to. The draft document service plan was brought to you, members, for approval for consultation in December, and as part of your papers you had three appendices today. Appendix 3 is that original document that was brought to you in December and sent out to consultation. I'm taking in reverse order. Appendix 2 is the outcomes of the consultation, and Appendix 1 is the response to that consultation and the final document, draft document, for your approval for publication today. Before we go any further, members, I'd just like to hand over to my colleague Amber, who will talk you through the consultation process, the methodology and the mechanisms that we use to consult on the proposals within the Appendix 3 of the papers. Amber, thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So the consultation on the service plan proposals ran for a 7-week period from the 4th of January to the 18th of February, and it was predominantly done through an online questionnaire. We did make hard copies, and on request, copies in alternative language and formats were available if required. The survey set out multiple questions asking for views on our proposals, our planning process, the identified risks to local communities, and our proposed action to address these risks under 7 key objectives, and there was also a question in relation to our budget. In total, we received 210 questionnaire responses. Just to give you some wider statistics, this compares to 173 responses received to the service plan and RMP consultation, which ran in 2019. It's a 21% increase. We do recognise that this is only 0.02% of our population, but on doing some wider research in comparison with other fire and rescue services, this is in line with that figure, and sometimes those consultations ran for a 12-week period, so we were on course with that. Equally, the responses we received were of good quality. So we had a fully integrated approach to our method of communication and engagement to reach as many people as possible, as many of our key stakeholders that was outlined in our sort of document for preparing for consultation. So you've got a full list of all the ways that we communicated, but just to draw on a few, we had the online survey published on SurveyMonkey. We worked with we contacted over 100 local media outlets to get that information out to the public via press releases. We did some paid-for advertising in hyperlocal publications, so the Voice publications that go out across Bristol and also in North Somerset Life. We created a QR code for ease of accessibility so that people could access the survey more easily. We did Posting on social media, so both organic posting and targeted paid for advertising across multiple platforms, targeting various audiences. We had a 2-week bus advertisement campaign on key bus routes across the service area. We also hosted a virtual community event to present and discuss the proposals and gather feedback. That was attended and recorded so that people could engage with that meeting after it had taken place. And we contacted all of our key stakeholders, including Avon and Somerset Local Resilience Forum, the police and other wider partners. Hopefully you all saw that the information was provided to you in your Chief Fire Officer's weekly update to share with your constituents. We also drew on our key community stakeholder contact list to really reach particularly those more underrepresented groups to make sure that they were able to have their say. We also fully communicated with staff. The survey was sent to everyone in the service and encouraged to take place, and it also featured in our bulletin. As part of the survey, we did collate people's personal information and ask for a respondent profile for those who wanted to volunteer it. This was predominantly to understand that our marketing had been successful and where we wanted to target. We then took all of those responses and collated them and responded to them each individually. And you'll note in the executive summary, over half of people strongly agreed that our planning process was suitable and sufficient. 80.9% of respondents strongly agree with the risk identified, and you can see the figures aligned to our different objectives and how people felt. We obviously took those responses, and those have now fed into the proposals document and into the service plan, and ultimately we wanted to create a plan that was accessible, easy to access, and featured some of the things that were in there.
Thank you, Amber. Just on page 52 of your papers, members, you will see there's a précis of the consultation results, which is referenced into Appendix 2 of your papers. One thing I would like to point out to members is we did receive a response from the Fire Brigade Union, which are in opposition or opposed to the introduction of the wording within the service plan in 5.5 on page 52, which is the action was to implement new ways of working to assist with medical emergencies within the community. They cite that as being not part of the firefighters' role map. I believe this is part of a national position from the Fire Brigade Union. However, we also have existing models within our service for medical response, but also that exist in other areas of the region that the Fire and Rescue Service are supporting colleagues in the ambulance service, particularly in most recent times during the pandemic, where we've had firefighters supporting the ambulance service and on a regional level have directly saved 185 lives as a result of that support. It is also a duty for us as a Fire and Rescue Service to collaborate with our partner agencies, and also we have our own collaboration strategy within the service. However, it is right and proper for us to acknowledge and take on board the feedback as part of that consultation. And I present to you a slight change in the proposal in the wording of the service plan, members, in 5.6 of your papers, where the wording has been slightly changed in recognition of the feedback as part of that consultation from the Fire Brigade Union, and that is to explore and consider how new ways of working would assist medical emergencies within the community, utilising the skills and capability within the service and building on existing examples of good practice with a view to potentially piloting different models of assistance. And of course, in doing that, we'll have, of course, engaged with the Fire Brigade Union in any matters that are considered to meet that objective. So I put forward to you, members, Appendix 1, which I will be delivering on your behalf as your new Chief Fire Officer, our service plan for approval for publication. Thank you, members.
Thank you. And are there any comments on this? All right, I'll start with Councillor Eddy, then I'll work round the room, okay?
Thank you, Chairman. In my view, this document, which has now been out for consultation and endorsement through that does represent everything which Mick and his team has been leading to actually change for the better our fire service and make it fit for purpose for the early 21st century. There's nothing in the document which was consulted which hasn't been through our committees and through this authority, and I'm pleased to hear that it's received an overwhelming endorsement from the general public. I'm pleased Simon's alluded to the trade union response on the emergency medical reply. His proposed change of wording seems to actually fit the bill, so I'm pleased with that. But overall, I'm very happy with this document and I'll be endorsing it, Chairman.
Thank you. And can I see who it was? It's a job looking round this room. It's so big. I think with a couple of hands up over this side. Let's start with
Councillor Brown.
Thanks. Can I just say, I know from speaking to some of our firefighters that there are real concerns about as we've discussed before, about the assisting with the ambulance service responses. So can I thank you for the service for taking that on board in the revised category. And can I also thank whoever did the graphic design, because I think the proposed document looks much better than the previous version. So yeah, I'd like to comment on that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Down to Amber's team and corporate communications, and Mark as well, who all sits at the back of the room.
Yep.
So I have no problem with the document and clearly will support it. Just as regarding the consultation, the response in terms of percentage of the residents is exceptionally low. So I appreciate you did go through lots of channels, but what would you do differently to get a greater response? What do you feel is missing? Because a fire service is something that most people hold dear, so I'm surprised. It's not like a unitary authority budget, which is not exactly the most exciting thing.
So I think there's a few things for this, really. I think when we do sort of go out and about and speak to people, largely that they're happy, so that doesn't evoke them to then make a response either way. So I think it is, for us, it is around that all-round year promotion of the document to get people on board to understand the importance of both supporting or providing constructive criticism, so that when we get to this focused period of consultation, people are really well informed, really well abreast of what the service are doing and how we're doing it, and therefore you get that bigger pickup. We're also liaising with our counterparts in other fire and rescue services to understand what sort of things they might be doing differently, or those people have a more positive or successful rate, and looking at the different ways in which we do it. So I think we're always sort of learning and want to improve on that and open to any ideas for suggestions and that wider circulation.
So will you then, based upon that, I don't know if you're allowed to store the details of the people who replied due to GDPR and all of those things, but then will there be a communication plan to demonstrate to people how the service is or is not delivering to their service plan?
Yeah, so in terms of our communications and our campaigns, they all sort of feed back towards that golden thread and feeding into where we do deliver against the service plan. So yeah, we do have, unfortunately, with the survey it is anonymous because of GDPR and sort of getting that. We have discussed about, do we change that approach to it, and do we follow GDPR protocol to actively capture people's data so that we can continue engaging with them. Where people do approach us, we do try to strike up a relationship so that we can ultimately get their viewpoint, but also utilise any connections that they have with the local community, and then we can keep that conversation going throughout the year, whether it's on the plans, the communications plans that happen throughout the year, or whether they're during the specific consultation period.
Any more comments from anybody? Can't see any hands up. No. In that case, can I have somebody to...
Chair, before we move to the recommendations, in view of the change which was outlined in paragraph 5.6, I think the feeling I'm getting from the room is that is welcomed, that new wording. If that's the case, the recommendation should be A, consider the outcomes of the public consultation, and B, subject to A above, approve the service plan, subject to the new wording proposed at paragraph 5.6 of the report, which will appear... Oh, sorry. Okay, it has already been included. Excuse me, that's fine. I didn't realise it had already been included. Thank you.
Should I formally move the recommendations, Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Richard. Can I have somebody to second it then, please? Right, thank you. In that case, doing the voting, anybody... trying to find my script here. Anybody against, first of all? No. Any abstentions? No. Can I see all those in favour then, please? I think that's unanimous. Yeah, thank you very much. Right. Okay. Right, so the next item is item 9 for decision, and that's, I think the Treasurer is going to present this one, the 2022-23 to 2023-26 medium-term financial plan. So to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the Fire Authority with its four-year financial strategy, and that's from April 22 to the 31st of March 2026. And this is a requirement within the Fire and Rescue National Framework for England. The financial strategy is based on the 22-23 annual budgets that the Fire Authority approved in February 22, and I feel that provides the organisation with a robust budget baseline. In line with best practice, financial modelling has been undertaken on key income and expenditure variables, including pay, non-pay, contingency budgets and income levels. Appendix 1 on page 189 demonstrates that we are proposing a balanced financial position over the next 4 years. And Appendix 2 on page 190 provides further detailed information on income and expenditure for the 4 years of this financial strategy. I would note 2 items to members in Appendix 2 that may be of particular interest. The first item is shown in Section 5 of the costs, and this relates to capital financing costs. So this is the cost that the authority incurs on external borrowings. And we can see from this appendix that we will be increasing our capital finance costs over the next 4 years if we seek to go out for external borrowings in 24-25. This is something that SLB and myself will be working through over the next financial year to see if there are other ways that we can try and finance that linked to prioritisation of capital spend. Further information on that information is contained within the capital strategy. The second item for mention to the Fire Authority today, again on Appendix 2, again in Section 5 of the costs, is efficiency savings. And this plan assumes that we will need to look at further additional savings from 2024-25. If I can now take members on to key financial risks. And these are outlined in Section 6 of the report on page 186. And I would just highlight to members that some of the key financial risks relate to some standard risks about the income base. We don't know in the future over the next 4 years, like any local authority, what that will look like. So there's a risk that we are mindful of. We're also mindful of the potential for non-pay costs to increase, and I think everybody's seen that over the last few months, linked into the recent situation in Ukraine. And this is particularly in terms of energy costs and fuel. We also have pensions, and there's a separate paper today that will discuss more risks around long-term pensions. And we also have collection fund deficit again that members are aware of from the annual budget report. To try to mitigate those risks, I've outlined in section 6.2 how we propose to minimise those and take management action. And this will be through a variety of ways in terms of we financially modelled this plan. So we've looked at sensitivity analysis to gain a reasonable and realistic position. We have adopted a contingency reserve within the plan. We've now strengthened financial reporting, as members are aware, over the last year. And the service is moving towards devolved budgets in the new financial year, which is aligning budgets closer to managers and directors. In addition to this, we also have balance sheet reserves, and again, this is something that I'll be working through with SLB over the next year. So I'm happy to take any questions on that. The recommendation is asking today if members could approve this 4-year financial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Councillor Bromley.
Councillor Bromley, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just noting, actually, in section 5.5, the fact that the new technology vehicles are about 100% more expensive than the equivalent internal combustion ones. I mean, is this going to limit the capital replacement programme and to make it harder to fulfil?
Yes, I'm going to hand over to Simon, but did you say section 5.5? Which paper are you looking at? Are you looking at the... Yeah, this paper's the one prior to that. This is the... no, that's kind of... I recognised... Yeah, that's the next paper. If we can take the question, then that would be helpful. Thank you. Councillor Wilk.
Thank you, Chair. I notice on both of the appendices the transformation programme is down to Mick, and I assume he's not coming in on his after his retirement to do that. Who's going to be taking hold of that particular programme, please?
That will be myself, Councillor, as your next Chief Fire Officer. So I'll be responsible for that programme and delivery of the outcomes of that programme.
Will you be still keeping on the operational equipment and fleet roles?
Sorry, I didn't catch that question. Sorry, Councillor.
Will you still be keeping the operational equipment and fleet roles?
Yes, as part of the transformation programme, that direction of travel, that work plan has been set out, and there's no intention to alter that direction of travel and meeting our aspirations.
Thank you.
I've handed that over with great pleasure, Councillor.
Some bonuses to retirement. Any more questions? Can't see any. No. In that case, would somebody like to propose this as accepted? Thank you. Do you know, it's really hard in this room. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to ignore you.
There is sunshine as well. So
half of you are in darkness, half of you aren't, and it's really hard looking around to see people. So could you sort of wave frantically at me, then I might catch up with you all. So,
Before proposing this, Chairman, perhaps you can indulge me just with a comment, because we move from questions directly to voting without debate. I was purely going to say, and I may be guilty of misjudging the mood of the meeting, but I always think I go for a time matter continuum when I come out here for Avon Fire meetings. In Bristol, you could never actually have a debate about budgets, finance, without having a row. But strangely, consensus normally rules the day here. All I would say is I would thank officers for not only managing but producing information which is helpful and constructive. And whilst I see there are significant risks which we aren't alone in facing, I am troubled about the impossible impact of pensions, for example. I believe, based upon previous experience, our officers are very adept at actually coming forward and containing those pressures. So thank you again. I'm very happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. And I'm very happy to take comments as well as questions. I assume people would make comments under that banner. So, right, so you've proposed it. Can I see a seconder, please? Thank you. Great. And can I see anyone against the proposals? No. Any abstentions? All right, can I see those in favour then, please? Good. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. In that case, back to you again, Danielle, for item 10.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I move on, apologies. I meant to say with the financial strategy, I wanted to give my thanks to the finance team and the head of finance, because when we receive these papers, it's very top level and it possibly looks quite straightforward. But there's months and months of work behind these papers. And I just wanted to thank the team, but also SLB, my colleagues in SLB, because this is a collective piece of work that we bring to you. So if I may just say that. In terms of paper 10, this is the capital programme. And this covers a 3-year period. This is a joint paper between myself and Angie and Simon. So if I do the introduction and give you an overview on the key financial issues, I will then pass over to Angie. So this strategy looks at a proposed capital expenditure plan for 3 years. And it also looks about the affordability of that proposed capital spend. And this is outlined in Appendix 1. And I believe that's on page 203. So when reviewing a financial strategy, we have a SIPFA prudential code, which has requirements for local authority bodies. And as part of that, local authorities have to demonstrate that their proposed capital plans and investment decisions, i.e. how you finance those plans, align to the service plan, which we've just discussed and had approved, and also other key objectives such as affordability, value for money, prudence and sustainability. So the Fire Authority does have power to borrow externally, and it can do this to finance its capital programme, but it is required to determine whether it is prudent to do so. The Prudential Code sets out the key prudential indicators which consider the affordability and the impact of those investment decisions. And those key indicators are contained in Appendix 3. Members can see within Appendix 3, the Fire Authority is within its external borrowing limit. And I have described in the earlier paper the revenue consequences should we go out to secure external borrowings. So I think on that basis, that covers the key financial issues. If I could now pass over to Angie to run through headlines on premises, and then Simon after if there's any questions on fleet. Thank you.
Thank you, members. So the proposed capital programme with reference to premises includes the following, which, as I kind of previously outlined, we've spoken about quite a lot at both PRSC and also the Strategic Member Engagement Forum. So the proposed capital programme provides for the completion of Avonmouth. We are nearly complete with Avonmouth. It would then just be for the final payment after completion of the appliance bays. I know a number of you have gone to see our new station at Avonmouth as well. It also provides for the completion of the design phases for Weston and Bath. Members will be aware that at Bath we are looking at the moment around a tri-service facility there and doing some work on the feasibility of that with our colleagues in the ambulance service and also with the police. And with Weston, we continue to look at what members' preferred option was, which is around the kind of relocation. So the amounts that you see in the proposal there are for the completion of the design phases of both of those, with a business case then coming back to Fire Authority on the costs and the developments for both of those, including, of course, the very important matter of affordability and funding. And within that, remembering that depending on what option we go for on Weston, there is the potential for a capital receipt, and a tri-service facility at Bath would also have some kind of collaborative funding model around that as well. Subject to Fire Authority approval of the business case, which will be coming forward, this also provides for the completion of the works at Bedminster in 22-23. And as indicated, we are expecting the costs coming forward in that business case to be higher than previously reported because of the volatility in the construction market at the moment and with supplies and resources around that. But as ever, we will work very hard on that to make sure that those costs are as low as they can be and well evidenced. The proposal also includes an allocation for general works. These are general works which are around continuing the maintenance of the Avon Fire and Rescue Service portfolio. And there are some increases indicated there with reference to, in particular, some work that we need to do on drainage because of some of Wessex water requirements, a continued investment in energy efficiencies, some to offset both of the increased energy costs and also net zero, and some other aspects of general works are included in there. I'm happy to go into further detail of those as required. It also points to a significant review of the estates programme during the next financial year, and aligned also to the strategic reviews of both our fleet and our environmental strategies, and including reflecting the indicative impact of where members would like to go with the future of the training provision with the, preparing for the JTC PFI concluding in 2028. There's also reference there to a new internal steering and prioritisation group, which will be commencing in financial year 22-23, where we will again, as directors and treasurers, do that review of our big strategies within the service linked to capital to look again at prioritisation and affordability going forward. I think that's probably the overview of where we are on premises. If I hand over to Simon first, and then perhaps we'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. Members, on the paper on page 192 from paragraph 3.3 within your papers, you will note there that it identifies the current makeup of our fleet provision across the service. And that fleet provision is made up from the service plan and how we match our resources to the risk profile of our service in relation to the integrated risk management. and that's matching the resources to those risks, and likewise that then will determine the type of vehicle or vehicle provisions that are required, not just in that local area, but also ensuring that we can provide a response to the risk across the wider service area. Within the service plan for 2022-2025, it does identify an objective where we will review the risk profiling and our fleet makeup to identify any changes that may be necessary or may be appropriate in relation to appliance utilisation rates, equipment usage, and also the appliance to fleet makeup. Members have been previously been informed around the fleet replacement strategy, whereas the usable life of a fire appliance is industry best practice is around 15 years before there becomes an issue with reliability for frontline fire appliances, and then 17 years for the more specialist vehicles from there on in. And depending where we are with our fleet replacement will determine, and some of the age of our fleet will be determined as and when those vehicles are replaced, and are replaced on a rolling basis year on year, distributed around the service. In relation to the Fleet Capital Programme on page 194 of your papers, members, in particular, Councillor Blomley's question around section 5.5 of the paper in relation to electric vehicles and how the funding of electric vehicles can be achieved. Electric vehicles are more expensive in relation to the capital outlay from more conventional combustion engine vehicles. We do have an authority strategy for net zero carbon emissions by 2030, and that paper here in front of you identifies the makeup of where we meet the clean air zone expectation of carbon emissions. And in fact, we have an exemption until 2025, and our fleet replacement programme looks to identify where we can meet that expectation close to 2025, but also aligned to the objective within the service plan to review our fleet provision around whether there be opportunities to change our fleet makeup, where there may be opportunities for a lower capital cost outlay for certain vehicles, which then may enable the service to reinvest in the more expensive capital outlay in the initial stages with electric vehicle technology. However, another piece of work that is currently undertaking is also the whole life cost of an appliance across that 15-year, potentially 17-year lifespan, aligned to the revenue expenditure and also the capital expenditure as well. So whilst electric vehicles may well be initially more expensive in terms of the capital investment than the whole life cost in terms of reduction in revenue expenditure, that work is currently being reviewed at this moment in time, and we will be able to report back to members at future meetings in relation to any changes in fleet provision. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that comprehensive paper. And can I see any questions or comments from anyone? Councillor Eddy?
My caveat comments on the previous report apply to this, which I'm broadly happy with, of course. I do have one question, and it's just for information. I see in the appendix next year we're proposing to spend about £500,000 on a hovercraft, though I couldn't actually see any reference to that in the narrative report. I wonder whether officers could just inform me a bit about that, and it's not just because I fancy test driving it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. We do have a hovercraft in the service which is about 17, 18 years old now. It's quite significant. It's quite tired, it's unreliable. We've reviewed the risk profiling as part of that RRMP process, and we do currently have a working group that's looking at an alternative or a replacement response, if you like, response capability and what that might look like, particularly in the Western area for mud rescues and how we work with our partner agencies within the Western-super-Mare area.
Thank you, Chair. Just add something to that, if I may, Simon. This is about capability. This is about trying to solve the problem that we have. And the problem is people getting stuck in the mud. What can we do about that? A few things, excuse the pun, but we need to get upstream and do the prevention work to stop people doing that in the first place. But of course, we need to respond when we need to respond. So it's not necessarily a hovercraft we're looking at. What we're looking for is a response capability that's able to rescue people from the mud in a safe way. It may not look like a hovercraft. Do you know what I mean? So it is about capability rather than anything else.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I do remember when we first had an induction session and they showed us the hovercraft, there was an issue about how little time it takes for the skirt to get shredded on rocks and things when you're going out.
Yeah, I did have an opportunity of piloting the hovercraft, which was an experience, and apparently I'm a natural, but they would say that to the chief, wouldn't they? But of course, it is a piece of machinery that's fantastic at what it does, but there could be something better out there, because it is, as Simon has said, it's getting to, shall we say, beyond its life cycle, and it is taking a lot of maintenance. Its cost is fairly significant. So there's other ways of doing that particular rescue. So
You do actually wonder when you see some of the footage of people going out and getting stuck in the mud. Still, anyway, any more comments or questions? Yes.
Thanks. Two questions. One with regards to the house sale referred to in 5.3, the 125,000, which is anticipated to come in 22-23, but suggests that it might take later. Is that figure set in stone, or will it be potentially revalued if it doesn't actually progress until later on? That's the first question.
Councillor, thank you for your question. I am aware of this because I'm the clerk who's sourced legal advice about the sale of this property, and that legal advice directly related to us getting the right proceeds of sale for this property. There are reasons why that figure is lower than the valuation, which I won't go into because they're confidential. But I am told that this decision is linked to the person leaving the service and possibly buying the property, and also that we will have new valuations done at that point. So although it may not be in this financial year, the valuations will be updated.
Thanks, that's much fuller response than a very full response, thank you. The other question I had was with regards to the emergency services network, which is apparently due to be rolled out, but subject to ongoing delays. And it's going to replace Airwave. As I understand it, Airwave has certain limitations when you're at an incident in terms of mobility for the person operating it. So I was going to ask if the ESN is anticipated to provide additional properties.
Yep, so the emergency services network operates through the 5G technology, dissimilar to your mobile phones, which is much more in terms of the infrastructure and building the infrastructure is, I guess, more fit for the future, intended fit for the future, and can be upgraded more easily in terms of the mobile phone technology and tapping into that, whereas the Airwave now is potentially outdated technology and the way that it operates. So that's the principles to move from the Airwave to the emergency services network, which is not just the fire and rescue service sector. It is all emergency services, including the Coast Guard and other agencies that might use the Airwave facility as well.
Any other questions, comments? Can't see anybody. Okay, in that case, can I have a proposer for this, please? Don, thank you, and a seconder. And Richard, thank you. In that case, please, can I see anybody against? Any abstentions? And those in favour? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Right, in that case, we'll move on to item 11 about members' allowances scheme. And can I just point out that there are a couple of typos in the report that somehow have sneaked in, not quite sure how, but they refer to allowances being paid to him, no hers. So I'm sure female members of the authority would join with me in anticipating that we will be treated equally, and I'm sure we will. So thank you. I think you're doing this, Amanda, aren't you? You're presenting.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you will recall that you had last year approved your members' allowances scheme, and we did make sure it was gender neutral in the wording, so I'm amazed that the wording's managed to creep back in, but anyway, that will be resolved. So in accordance with local government legislation, we are required to update the members' allowances scheme every financial year. It updates what is paid to elected members by way of a basic allowance, special responsibility allowances for those who chair committees, and also the independent person's allowance in addition to travel and subsistence allowances. As you will recall, when we issued the members' allowances scheme last year, we noticed that the scheme needed to be independently reviewed because it is incrementally increased every year in line with the Green Book Pay Award, but you can only do that for 4 years on a trot without an independent review. So that was undertaken by Bryony Holden, the Chief Executive of South West Councils, and you will recall that you saw her report dated November 2021 at your Fire Authority meeting on the 15th of December. She made 11 recommendations and you approved all of those recommendations. So what this paper member presents to you today is the updated Members' Allowances Scheme for 22-23, but only introduces the changes she recommended for this financial year, because you will recall that she recommended a two-stage process. So a slight increase this year in some allowances, a reduction in others, but then another increase next year. So you will see the changes, the figures change again next year. So the allowances scheme is at Appendix 1, and I'm happy to amend the recommendation to say that it is to be approved subject to me checking that all gender neutral terms are applied. That is not a problem. If I can refer you please to the financial implications on page 208 of your bundle. What I just need to bring to your attention is that the financial implications were fully set out, and I've replicated the table in the December 2021 paper. Those figures have been uplifted by 1.75% following the NJC Green Book Pay Award for 1st of April last year, but was only belatedly announced on the 1st of March this year. So you'll see that I've listed at 4.2, that the basic allowance has slightly increased, the chair's allowance and so on, and that's all by 1.75%. We are still waiting, we will then be waiting for the next pay award to be announced for 1st of April 22. So we seem to always be on catch up with this, I'm afraid, but as you will be aware, back payments are made. So once the pay awards are awarded, the back payments are made to members. I don't think there's any need for me to go over the key considerations again, because I've dealt with that in my summary about the paper. So I'm happy to take any questions from members, please.
Any questions, comments?
I'd just like to thank Amanda for regularising this. I think we've now got a decent process we can move forward on. So I'd like to propose acceptance.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any other comments before I ask for a seconder? No, in that case, can I have somebody to second this, please? Thank you. And can I ask then, is anybody against the report? No. Any abstentions? No. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is item 12. And again, this is Amanda, and it's the annual review of remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair. We have had a declared interest in this paper by both the Chief Fire Officer and the members of the Service Leadership Board and the statutory officers, because their pay is determined by way of a percentage of the Chief Fire Officer's pay. I don't think those people need to leave the room. I am presenting the paper, but if members feel that it's appropriate for them to leave the room, I'm sure they'd be happy to do so. But the whole of the top table will effectively disappear if we do that. So. No, is everybody happy to proceed? Okay, I'll take that as yes. So, Chair, thank you. Yes, this matter has already been considered, as it is every year, by the People and Culture Committee. They met on the 4th of March 2022, They reviewed the pay and noted the fact that the National Joint Council had made a pay award for brigade managers with effect from 1st of January 2021 of 1.5%, which was announced in June last year. The People and Culture Committee were told that the Chief Fire Officer did not ask for any local award of pay in addition to the National Pay Award, and they decided to make no local pay award. So the recommendation is that you also note the National Joint Council Pay Award for last year, that you make no local pay increase to the Chief Fire Officer's salary, and that you note that the National Joint Council Pay Award, which should have been granted on the 1st of January 2022, is yet to be announced. Again, we're on catch-up, unfortunately. So by way of background, if I can just refer you to page 223 of the bundle, and it's worth me pointing out that at paragraph 5.4, I explain that the Chief Fire Officer is paid in accordance with his Gold Book terms and conditions of pay. And what that sets out is a two-track approach. And the two-track approach is that one part of his pay award is negotiated and announced nationally by the National Joint Council, but the fire authority itself can also make a local award, but that has not been utilised for several years, I understand, so it's just the National Pay Award which has been accepted. At paragraph 5.5, I explain that all members of the Service Leadership Board and the statutory officers are paid a set percentage of the Chief Fire Officer's pay, and therefore those rates are set out in the table at that paragraph. You obviously have appointed your new Chief Fire Officer, who sits to my right, and his pay that was awarded on his appointment was in line with last year's pay award, so the figures were as approved by you last year and then updated annually. I don't think there's anything else for me to add, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anyone?
Since the chairman's already been bored rigid by my opposition to Bristol's pay policy over 5 years, I'll be mercifully short here. The primary reason is that in Bristol's case, and it may be in the neighbouring authorities, the pay policy only reflects pay of permanent members of staff, not, for example, interims, who can obviously significantly boost their pay, of course. And in my view, that makes a mockery of the claim about the top member of staff only having whatever's 10 times or so that of the least paid member of staff. Now, my understanding is the fire authority is rather more prescribed, so I don't think we've got the same latitude to take on interims, but can Mick or Simon confirm that?
I hope I can, Councillor. The next paper is a pay policy statement, which is where the fire authority declares that public money is going to be used to pay certain officers a certain value, a certain amount of salary, and that's a requirement. So it is laid out. So it is fairly rigid. If anybody is temporarily appointed or is interim, they will assume the salary of the person that they're replacing. Does that make sense? And that's the process that we follow. they don't get paid more, they would get paid the salary that they would be
I am
temporarily covered.
reassured to hear, Mick, that Avon Fire carries on a quite common sensible policy. I would expect nothing less, of course, so I have no objection, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from anybody? No? Okay. In that case, can I have somebody to propose this, please? Yeah. And a seconder? Right. Chris. Yeah. Great, thank you. And okay. Can I see anybody against this proposal? No. Any abstentions? No. Can I see those in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 13 is the approval of pay policy statement. Is where we are now. And Amanda, it's back to you again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies, Councillor Eddy. I should have explained that this was my next paper, which outlines the pay policy statement for 2022-23. So this is again already being considered by the People and Culture Committee, which met on the 4th of March. They reviewed this proposed pay policy statement, which you will find in Appendix 1 to my paper, and have recommended its approval to you. If I can briefly go over to the key considerations on page 226 of my paper. Under the Localism Act 2011, pay policy statements must be prepared for each financial year and approved by the full fire authority and published before the 31st of March. Hence, it needed to be in your agenda today. The proposed pay policy statement is set out in Appendix 1. I should point out that although there are no substantive changes proposed, there is one change to the version which was approved by People and Culture, and that one change was to take due account of the NJC Green Book Pay Award, which was announced on the 1st of March 2022. So that announcement had not been made by the time the papers were published for People and Culture. So I've had to amend the wording to weave that into the pay policy statement. You will also note at paragraph 5.2 that because the Fire Authority employs more than 250 staff, it is also obliged to comply with the gender pay gap reporting in accordance with the Equality Act 2010 Gender Pay Gap Information Regulations 2017, and that information must be published after the snapshot date, which for us, it depends what sort of organisation you are, but for us that's the 31st of March each year, and we have 12 months from that date to publish that information. So it is proposed that we present that gender pay gap information to the People and Culture Committee meeting in June, and they will approve it for publication, so it won't need to come back to this Fire Authority. I don't think there's anything else I need to add, apart from the fact that the statement includes what you would expect to see in terms of how the remuneration for each of the categories of staff is calculated. So you have Chief Fire Officers, uniformed operational staff under Grey Book terms and conditions, and corporate services staff under Green Book terms and conditions. It also sets out the pay to the lowest paid employees and the relationship between the remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer and other employees and the lowest paid. One thing I would refer you to on page 233 of your papers is there is set out there the internal pay comparators and the lowest pay point that is paid by Avon Fire and Rescue Service. And as requested by People and Culture, we have explained that only 14 employees are at this pay point. That was an additional statistic which was requested. So unless anybody has any other questions, that's my paper for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions, queries, comments? No? Okay. In that case, can I have somebody to propose
I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, can we move to the vote? Can I see those against? Any abstentions? And those in favour? It's unanimous again, I think. Councillor Eddy, are you voting yes? I'll assume you are, yeah. Okay, it's carried anyway, thank you. And the next item is back to the Treasurer for the 2021-2022 Revenue Financial Reports, item 14.
Thank you, Chair. This report gives the Fire Authority an update on this year's financial position. So the 21-22 revenue budgets from the 1st of April 21 to the 31st of January 22. As shown within Appendix 1, the forecast outturn is showing an underspend of £23,000, which equates to less than 0.04% of the approved annual budget, which is just under £52 million. So I believe that demonstrates a very well managed revenue position for the Fire Authority. Appendix 2 shows more details in terms of income and expenditure. And members can see that the majority of the budgets are being managed effectively within the approved budgets, which again is a very positive position for the Fire Authority to be in. Where there have been any large increases, and a good example of that would be the national increase on energy costs, management have taken action. And I know the premises manager has done a lot of work to negotiate a new contract, which has minimised our future risk moving forward. In terms of that particular example, members will see in Appendix 3 there is a budget adjustment seeking approval today of £309,000. In terms of recommendations, members are asked to note the latest revenue position and to approve the budget adjustment within Appendix 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, see, I failed. I forgot to turn it on. In that case, anybody against the proposal, the report? No. Any abstentions? Those in favour, please show. Right, thank you. Good, that one's passed then. In that case, we'll move on to item 15. I'm wondering if after this maybe we should consider a break because we've had quite a long meeting.
There is also one paper I want to bring forward in the agenda because we have a report writer who needs to leave. So maybe, if we do this report...
in that case, I'm happy if we want to move that one forward.
Shall we do that? Sorry, Pete, would you mind if we change the order slightly? So if we could have, please, the report at item 20, which is the Public Sector Decarbonisation Grant Update by Annabel Harford, then that will help her, and then we can have a short break, if that's okay.
Just conscious it's quite a long afternoon. We've had a lot of reports to get through and people might want a quick break. If you're happy to go ahead, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for accommodating that. The reason why I need to leave will become evident soon. So this paper is just for noting. So I just wanted to really give an update on the funding that we received last year from the public sector decarbonisation scheme of just over £823,000. And it's also an update on the renewable energy and low carbon technology contract that we put in place to deliver on some of the key projects funded by the grant. So firstly, I'm delighted to report that all grant funding has now been utilised down to the last pound and pence. And all grant-funded projects, as listed in Section 5.2, are now complete and delivered on, with the exception of a major electrical upgrade at Bedminster by Western Power. And until this is complete, we're unable to switch on the solar PV and air source heat pump systems we've installed there, but the fund administration body, SALIX, have made an allowance for this as they recognise that electrical network issues have affected many of the grant-funded public sector organisations, so it's a nationwide issue. So just to give you a high-level summary of some of the measures that the service has implemented with the grant funding, we've installed 5 more solar PV systems to generate electricity. We've tripled our existing capacity. Between those 5 solar PV systems, the installed capacity, for those who like these sorts of statistics, is 330 kilowatt peak. So we now have solar PV on 11 of our sites. In combination with 3 of those systems, we've also installed battery storage systems, which will help maximise the use of our own power generation, and we are setting them up so that they maximise the use of the battery at peak tariff periods, so therefore that will reduce our electricity expenditure even further. We've installed another solar thermal system to heat hot water, to preheat hot water, so we now have 2 such systems across our estate. We've installed 3 air source heat pump systems to replace carbon-intensive gas and the last remaining oil-fired heating system. So in addition to the new Avon station where we've also installed air source heat pumps, we've now got 4 of those systems across our estate. Measures also include full LED, so efficient lighting refurbs at 2 of our sites. We've maximised the insulation and double glazing in all 12 buildings covered by the grant funding, and we've undertaken major electrical upgrades at 5 of the sites covered by the grant funding. So our next step is to meet the final reporting and completions process requirements set by the grant administrator. And then, obviously, from now onwards, we'll be monitoring the performance of the systems and the measures that we put in place and the savings as a result in terms of costs, energy and carbon. At current energy prices, we've estimated that the grant-funded measures will achieve annual savings of just under £80,000 and around a sort of 80 to 90 tonnes of carbon, which is about 6% of our total organisational carbon footprint. These figures and performance information will be reported annually to the Performance Review Scrutiny Committee. So we'll also be reviewing lessons learned from the whole grant funding period and the project implementation, and assessing the potential to replicate some of these measures or as appropriate elsewhere on our estate towards our net zero by 2030 goal. So I would also like to highlight for members some of the significant recognition that the service has received as a result of the funding we received and the projects that we've implemented. So just to give you an example of a few of these, in the recent inspection report by HMIC FRS, they noted of particular note is the inclusion of an example of innovative practice, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme under Future Affordability on page 30. HMIC FRS notes that Avon Fire and Rescue Service is the only fire and rescue service in England to secure a public sector decarbonisation grant of £823,670. So the grant administration body, SALIX, has also asked me to be a guest speaker at a webinar for a number of webinars for grant recipients of later funding rounds. And the government department behind the funding, BASE, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, has asked us to present to their policy team, and prior to the Ukraine invasion, had also lined up a ministerial visit to some of our projects. And the reason why I need to leave quite soon is because tonight the Property Services Manager and I are attending the National Green Energy Awards at the Assembly Rooms in Bath, as the grant-funded projects have been shortlisted for a National Clean Energy Award. So finally, I'd just like to say I think it's important to acknowledge the huge amount of work that's been involved in delivering on this grant, with extremely tight deadlines set by the grant administration body and with very limited staff resources. And I think that as a service, we should be incredibly proud of what we've achieved, and of course with great support from all of our senior management and from the Fire Authority. So thank you very much, and on that note, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. That's really good, and we'll be looking forward to hearing the result from tonight. So, yes.
Thank you. So firstly, it's amazing. It's a real example of what people can do in tight timescales when motivated. Only just one clarification. Within the report, it lists a number of projects nearly complete, but you said in your verbal update it's only the power supply at Bedminster. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Yeah, no, just because the report was written about 4 weeks ago. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Richard?
Not really a question, you'll be really, but just to add to what Adam, the chairman, said, your reports have gone to all my committees, and we've been very impressed by what you and your team have been doing, so well done. You're a credit to actually Avon Fire, and I wish you well this evening.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown?
Thanks. It's well done on what's been achieved, and I hope you win tonight. I was going to ask, Tempo Station is in the process of getting connected to Bristol's heat network. That's obviously not mentioned in this paper, so I assume that that's an additional piece of work. And then the other thing I was going to ask was, with the electric vehicles, are we going to be looking to use excess energy in those to supply them, to sell it back to the grid?
So on the first point, so Bristol City Council also received a grant from the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme to install heat networks. So the linking up of Temple Fire Station to the Temple District Heat Network is being entirely funded by Bristol City Council. And on the second point, so as you may know, we are in the process of installing an electric vehicle charging network across the estate. In fact, we've finished the first phase, which was to all of our larger sites, and we're now embarking on the second phase to the smaller sites, particularly the on-call stations. How we've set up the solar systems and the battery storage systems is that they will provide energy to the sites in entirety. So we haven't linked directly between the electric vehicle charging and the generation systems. Does that answer your question?
Not sure. And as far as I'm aware, that certainly private car operators can essentially sell the excess energy and the batteries back into the network when they're not using their vehicles.
Okay, yeah, no, sorry, I see what you mean. We haven't looked at that yet, but we're still at pretty early days in terms of transitioning our fleet over to electric. So I'm sure in time when we have more electric vehicles, and particularly if we do move to electric fire appliances, which have very large sort of battery systems, then we may be looking more to sort of make the most of the sort of whole demand side management schemes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think Annabelle has just demonstrated why she is one of the 137 most influential kind of women in Bristol, and echoing very proud of her and the team, and also the wider team effort with, I know, Tanya and her procurement team also very involved in pulling out the stops of getting all of the underpinning contracts for this kind of flowing and moving in time to deliver all of this. Just to also say that I'm working with the police and the PCC, who have also picked up our achievements in this area and want to also learn from what we are doing, and also to say, whilst I might give Annabelle and the premises team a slight break after the kind of achievements, we continue to look at other funding sources as well, and potentially a decarbonisation grant Mark II to be able to continue to progress kind of in that area. So just to give kind of further reassurance to members on that.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just add my thanks to Annabelle, to Tanya, and to Simon in particular. The reason this has happened is because of, I said earlier about fantastic people doing wonderful things. This is a great example of that. The speed that this was done and the quality that was done speaks volumes, and that's, for me, is why and how we managed to achieve this grant. Not only have we managed to achieve the grant, we've managed to deliver it on time as well and on budget, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So you should be proud.
Great. That's really good news. Anybody else want to make a comment, or shall we let Annabelle get ready to go and win? Great. Thank you very much. And we'll keep our fingers crossed. So thank you. And I think now if I suggest we have 5 to 10 minutes quick break, if that's okay for everybody.
Shall we say that we come back for 10 to 4? Would that be fine?
I think that would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. In that case, we'll start again. And the next item on the agenda is item 15. And I think Peter Davis is going to report on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This paper is presented primarily for noting, although members are asked to reconfirm a decision which the authority previously took in relation to governance and scrutiny of our HMI CFRS inspection action plan back in March 2019. But that's something to which I'll return shortly. The purpose of the report is to take our first opportunity to formally present to you the results of our most recent full inspection undertaken by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services in the summer of last year. To be honest, it does feel like slightly old, but nevertheless still welcome news, as the inspection report, which is provided at Appendix 1, was published on the 15th of December 2021, which you'll recall coincidentally was the date of your last full ordinary meeting. We had received this inspection report 24 hours before that meeting, and therefore, with the timescales required for preparation and submission of papers, and the fact that the report was under embargo, we clearly weren't able to provide in written format the report for members' consideration at that December meeting, although you will recall that the Chief Officer gave a verbal update on the day of the meeting, and that the report was emailed out to members on the day of publication. The report itself, through the text, demonstrates significant clear improvement across the majority of the inspection areas, across the 3 principal areas of inspection, as detailed in Table 1 on page 243 of your pack. although perhaps slightly frustratingly, the text of the inspection report, which is overwhelmingly positive, is perhaps masked by those grades provided in the 2021-22 column of Table 1. But I suppose I will borrow the words of the Chair in her introductory remarks, where she talked about the effort taken to turn the ship around and make progress on our journey of continual improvement. So those grades perhaps mask that fantastic effort which has gone on over the last 2 years to really turn things around and make significant improvements in our overall inspection programme. And those improvements are really demonstrated by 3 key aspects of this latest HMI report. Those being that the 3 causes of concern identified in our Round 1 report have all been resolved to the satisfaction of HMI. That all our previous inadequate ratings have also been resolved, and that no further causes of concern have been identified in our Round 2 report. Members won't be surprised that I draw particular attention to the improvement in the graded judgment for promoting the right values and culture, which appears under the people pillar of the inspection regime. And it is particularly pleasing to report that we have jumped 2 grades from inadequate to good in this latest inspection report. And in order to kind of emphasise that, I would also just like to bring members' attention to the fact that during his evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee when presenting his annual State of Fire report, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Fire Rescue Services, Sir Thomas Windsor, noted that Avon jumped 2 grades in this round from inadequate right up to good, and it's very rare for an inspected body to jump 2 grades in one inspection. So even at that national level, the achievements of our service are being picked up and reported, which is very heartening. The report also picks out as a particular example of innovative practice what we've already heard about from Annabelle, that public sector decarbonisation scheme, and that was picked out as an example of innovative practice within the report. Members will recall that Avon Fire Rescue Service sits within the Inspectorate's Western region, and as such our territorial HMI is Wendy Williams, who provided the summary at the front of our latest inspection report, where she confirmed that she's very pleased with the progress the service has made and was delighted that those 3 causes of concern can now be discharged from the 2018 inspection. And again, in this inspection, HMI identified no further causes of concern. The whole point of the inspection regime is one of continual improvement, and within our latest report, HMI have identified 22 areas for improvement, which now form the basis of our Round 2 inspection action plan. That's now been finalised in its mature draft format, and subject to agreement of members here today, that will be tabled to the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee at its April meeting for approval for initial publication. And we are also recommending that our governance arrangements around our inspection action plan for Round 1 are continued into Round 2, as they gained favourable comment from HMI and involve managerial scrutiny at the service leadership team, followed by member-led scrutiny at each meeting of the PRSC. So I don't intend to go through the report in any further detail, because obviously members have already seen that and it is being tabled really for the record. So moving to the recommendations, I would just ask that the authority note the latest inspection report, reconfirms its previous decision from its initial meeting in March 2019, to delegate that authority to PRSC to approve our latest iteration of our action plan and maintain member-led scrutiny at each of its meetings thereafter, and also note the current HMICFRS inspection activity and next steps as set out in the report. So, Chair, there I'll pause and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I would comment that because of the importance of meeting or improving the standards, etc., to meet the requisite standard, that actually we should be seeing an action plan, and I think that should come to the full authority before it goes to PRSC, because we are all equally involved in ensuring that the standards do improve as requested, and I know a lot of work has been done and it has definitely moved on a lot since the initial inspection. But I do think that it would be very helpful for the full authority to actually see the plan as it is, rather than going directly to PRSC.
Chair, can I just add to this that the next Fire Authority meeting is not until the 22nd of June, which is the AGM. So if that's your view, maybe a compromise would be for the initial action plan to go to PRSC as recommended, and then maybe come back to the full Fire Authority in June so that they can have a look at that first iteration and then leave the ongoing review to PRSC. I don't know if that's a sensible compromise.
Happy to take direction from members. The current process is, as outlined, is in line with the terms of reference of the PRSC. So that's what we've kind of designed the process to align with. But obviously if members take a view that it needs to come to the full Fire Authority, that's entirely in their gift.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously we'll be in members' hands in terms of what it is you want us to achieve. We were just following the same protocols we followed last time, Chair. We're more than happy to circulate the action plan to members following this meeting, because I think it's nearly, you tell me how far away you've got it there, okay? So we're more than happy to circulate it to members, and if it then follows the path through PRSC back to the Fire Authority in June, that probably fits well, as long as you're content and happy with that, members.
I do think it is important that everybody sees the action plan, so that would be fine if you can do that. Yeah. Any other comments? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presentation. I got a question regarding some of the cases since 2018-19 was in quite improvement, and some of them was good, but what I found it out, still some of them still requires improvement. What's the implications, or why you cannot tell us why you didn't improve? Is that something related to the COVID, or is there another implications? And the second one is very important for me to me. It says getting the right people with the right skills. 2018-19 was good, and now it says required improvement. So why is that? Thank you.
I think there are a number of factors. I mean, generally speaking, there was some impact from the COVID pandemic, and also in terms of the Inspectorate promoting continual improvement. The bar against which they set their graded judgments will obviously get higher inspection on inspection. So in order to reach their defined levels of graded judgments, fire and rescue services are required to continue to up their game, so to speak. In respect of the two graded judgments which went down, of which one you said about getting the right people with the right skills, I think I'd have to come back to you on the exact reasons for that.
I can probably help with that, Councillor. One of the key areas was around a succession plan, and actually having a tangible succession plan. We do lots of work around succession planning, but at the time when the inspection took place, my understanding is that our succession plan was out for consultation at the time. It wasn't published at that time. So as a result, you can can understand that there's probably a grade and judgment for that, if you know what I mean. So that was one of the reasons. But I'm reasonably assured that if the inspectorate were to come into the service now, that would be something which would be shown positively within our grading in the future.
I was going to ask if it's possible for an account member named Wendy, the regional person, to come and meet with PRSC, for example, and advise members in her words what could be done to help improve the efficiency. But having thought about that, she probably can't, because that's probably counterproductive from her view. But something that some local authorities do around corporate parenting is do fake Ofsteds. So have we ever considered doing a similar exercise so that when we come to the next review, we've gone through the exercise and hopefully in a stronger position? It's moving in the right direction, but to continue that journey.
Yeah, absolutely we can. We can do that in two ways. We always do a gap analysis, really. So we do our own self-assessment of where we are against the criteria. Peter's absolutely right. HMICFRS will quite rightly raise the bar each time. And that's why you are forever, it's about continuous improvement for sure. So we could do that. There is another mechanism that we could use, which is a local government association, the LGA, do a peer assessment mechanism, which should we say would go in tandem with the inspection regime. It doesn't replace it, of course. What it does do is it enables you a sense check against how you're doing in certain areas prior to the next inspection. So we could utilise that.
So when would be a sensible time to consider maybe asking the LGA to come and do a sense check, using your words, so we are aware of any potential shortcomings before the next inspection, so we can continue the journey?
I need to be careful because I'll be talking on behalf of a leadership that I won't be part of in the future. But I think that will depend. If it's something which is really quite difficult, you would want to do it further out. And other things you might want to do within a 2-year time frame, So it will all depend on what it is we're talking about. There is a mechanism there, and we would quite rightly, I think, take part in that because it's a facility that the LGA offer.
Any other comments?
If I may just add to what the Chief just said, the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is actually what the next round of HMICFRS inspection for fire will look like. So we've had 2 rounds of inspection against these 3 pillars of effectiveness, efficiency and people. But in a recent pre-appointment hearing, the next HM Chief Inspector pointed out that thematic review will be coming into fire service inspection, so it may be that round 3 inspection won't be looking like round 1 and round 2, but may have more of a thematic theme to it. So we just have to be cautious about what that is going to look like when the time comes.
I think just a final kind of comment to add to Mick's one as well is that what we will be coming to the next PRSC is we do look at our performance indicators both in terms of the organisational scorecard and then what we also monitor internally as kind of leadership team. We have just reviewed that in line with the new service plan, but also with an eye on what HMI look at. So that, I think, will enable both us as a leadership team, but also you as members through PRSC to have touch points going forward on how we are with some of these indicators that they kind of look at. So I think that will also enhance our ability to be aware of where we might need to put sort of additional resource into it kind of earlier in those areas. So that will be coming to your next PRSC as well in terms of performance targets and KPIs.
Chair, I think we had Councillor Wilcox who put his hand up first, and I see Councillor Bromley's got her hand up as well. So Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of People and Culture, I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask for this, but I would like updates coming on a 6-monthly basis about how we're actually matching these and improving these scores, because I'm concerned that some of the requires improvement scores haven't moved, and I would like to see some progress on those. And I don't know, can I ask for that? Am I allowed to ask for that?
I think if the chair is proposing that this comes back to Fire Authority, maybe that is on a 6-monthly basis,
Yeah.
and then you would get to see it as part of all the other elected members. I think that's entirely achievable. I'm turning to the new chief, Chair Roberts.
Yeah, that's very achievable. What we can also do is some of your regular reports, we can reference certainly the human resource reports when it comes to people element of the HMRC action plan. We can certainly weave in some of the activities that are taking place aligned to some of the greater judgments in how we're progressing from the people element from that perspective. So we could weave it into that reporting mechanism for you.
I would certainly welcome that, thank you.
Shirley?
Thank you, Chair. Just moving on from David's point there, something slightly different. Just the use of data on page, I think it's page 8 of the report. Not using the data being gathered effectively. I mean, and I guess I know that obviously there are IT upgrades going on, and do you think with the improved IT situation, the use of data will also improve as well?
Yes, Councillor, the answer is absolutely yes. This is about making good use of our data to turn it into good information, to turn it into good intelligence. And that is all part of our investment in IT. It's also part of our investment in software solutions, but making sure that people have got the right intelligence, the right information at the right time is really key to this. We do have systems in place already. What the report says, it doesn't say that we don't have systems. What it says is we could have better systems, and we all know that anyway, and that's why we're investing in those areas.
Any other comments? No.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just make one? I just want to say thank you to Pete, who does an outstanding job for us as our liaison officer, and the quality of the reports and the quality of the presentation is second to none. So thank you, Pete. From my perspective, this report is a really good position statement in time, albeit you always seem to be looking backwards. So some of the things we're reporting on here are probably a year ago, do you know what I mean? Which always becomes quite difficult. But I think we should be really proud of this in reality. If you read the narrative, Pete outlined it earlier, if you read the narrative of the report, it's very positive. And actually, Wendy Williams, our inspector, and the chief inspector have made very positive statements about the progress that we as a service are making. So I think we should be proud of that. But this is the springboard now. So the next action plan is where we go to the next stage and the next stage, looking for that ongoing, continuous improvement to get to outstanding. We said we want to get to good, but I'm setting the bar now. We want to get to outstanding, but of course that's going to take some time.
Thank you. I think...
Sorry, Simon, that was a hospital pass.
Thank you, Chief, for that.
All right. So I think from the contributions so far, there is a desire to see the plan at the next full meeting, and then for PRSC to take it forward from there. Just because it is so important to us as an authority that we know and could answer any questions from the inspection team, for instance, if we were asked about what is the plan for this or that, and so on.
Chair, can I just interject and say PRSC meeting is due next month, so I suggest if we stick with recommendation B, it will allow PRSC to see the first draft and thereafter report back to Fire Authority in June. Otherwise, you're delaying the whole process until June.
Delaying it is definitely not something we want to do. Okay, so as this is an item for decision, can I see anybody against the proposals that we make? Actually, I haven't had anybody to propose or second them, getting ahead of ourselves. So would anybody like, thank you, Adam. Seconder? Thank you. Is anybody against the proposal? No. Any abstentions? No, so I see those in favour, please. I think that's unanimous. Thank you.
And for the minutes, if we can replace the current C with a new C, which is to present the first draft of the Round 2 HMIC FRS Action Plan to the Avon Fire Authority in June. I can confirm that to you after the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and item 16 is another decision one. It's the forward plan, and the clerk is going to present this one.
Chair, with the forward plan, since this brief forward plan was published, there has been one change which I need to bring to your attention. So after consulting with both internal and external audit and looking at financial reporting and internal audit deadlines, it has been decided that there is no need to have two AGET meetings in quick succession, so there was going to be one in May and one in June. The decision has been taken that we can combine those meetings so that we just have the AGET meeting date on the 29th of June. That does mean that the list of reports that are set out there in the forward plan needs to be updated, because I need to now incorporate the reports that were going to the June meeting as well. So that is a change that I will need to make, and I will make that change on the forward plan, which will be published on our website in due course. The other thing I should bring to your attention is that later in the year we are bringing forward an AGET meeting date from December to November, again for reporting, financial reporting deadlines reasons. So those minor changes will be made. Apart from that, this is a snapshot of our forward plan. So we do have a full corporate forward plan with all the reports we expect you to review over the municipal year. This is a snapshot of what's coming up next. So that's why it's just a very short document. So I don't imagine anyone has any questions, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Oh, no. Okay. In that case, can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Don. And a seconder? Thank you. Right, so anybody against the proposal? No. Any abstentions? No. Can I see those in favour? Right, thank you. That's carried. And the next one is yours again, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you will recall that we commissioned an independent review of members' allowances scheme by Bryony Holden, the Chief Exec of South West Councils, and her report I referred to earlier today was dated November 2021 and presented to your Fire Authority meeting on the 15th of December. You carried all 11 of her recommendations, and that included a recommendation 10, which was a new role description for political group leaders, and that was an advisory recommendation. The reason she made that recommendation was she surveyed elected members as part of her review, and some elected members were unclear about what the role of political group leader entailed. And we felt it was a bit unfair for people to be put in that position and not know what was expected of them. So if I take you to the key considerations, normally any amendments to the Fire Authority Constitution are considered by a cross-party Constitution working group, but actually the process we have followed for new terms of reference is more detailed than that. I had an initial meeting with political group leaders on the 14th of February. And we had a bit of a brainstorming session when people suggested what should appear in terms of reference for political group leaders. I then took away the job to prepare a first draft of that document, which I circulated to political group leaders on the 1st of March. Minor changes were made to that, and then the document was presented to the member development session on the 11th of March. A couple of further suggestions were made during that meeting, and the document at Appendix 1 incorporates now all those changes which have been suggested by elected members. So in fact, rather than the Constitution Working Group, you've had all elected members having the opportunity to provide input to this document. So I don't propose to go through the terms of reference for the political group leaders in much detail. They start at page 302 at Appendix 1. it sets out what you would expect to see, really, which is to be the political group's leader and spokesperson when required, to assist me to ensure proportional representation on committees, and to make sure that each committee is chaired by each political group, to review agendas for fire authority meetings to see if there are any matters that need to be discussed between political members. And also for me, in terms of dealing with urgent decisions, it's helpful for me not to have to consult with 20 elected members. It makes more sense if I can contact 4 elected members for a heads up and a decision when it is urgent. Also, it helps me if there are any issues relating to member conduct or attendance. I have one person I can go to discuss those issues. And you will see at the end of the terms of reference at Annex A is an extract from our current standing orders, which sets out the process that I should follow as your clerk in the event that members don't attend meetings. I don't think there's anything controversial in there, and as I've said, members have had an opportunity to comment already, but I'm happy to answer any questions on those draft terms of reference.
Thank you, Amanda, and I think it's really helpful for anybody who is a group leader to have this, because I don't think we've had anything similar at all previously, so at least you know what is expected of you if you're standing for that role. Any comments from anyone?
Chair, I should add that this, if approved today, will be added to the latest iteration of the Constitution. I haven't decided where to slot it in yet. I need it to appear in a logical place. Mark at the back of the room, who's helping me with the new Constitution, will be delighted to hear that he's got this being added as well to the Constitution.
Okay, if there's no comments on this, it does seem to be a very sensible thing to do, I have to say. Can I have... Yeah, sorry.
Can I say something about the Annex S, just you mentioned, regarding with absence, what about the maternity leave? What option you can classify for that?
Councillor, thank you for your question. So there is no specific mention of maternity leave in the Constitution. I know because I have looked. However, in recent instances, we have obviously respected an individual's right to take maternity leave. And what we've done recently is we've made substitute arrangements for that elected member to be covered by somebody else. So it also appears in here, and I forget which paragraph number it is, but one is to arrange a substitute member from the political group to attend in the event that someone else can't attend. So covering arrangements would be one of the duties of the political group leader. Okay, does that answer your question?
Scale, for example, like the maternity leave.
I can't recall exactly the legislation relating to maternity leave, so I have no idea how long it goes on for, but we have HR department who can advise us on that. I can advise you separately if you wish, by email.
Okay, Don.
Thank you. I mean, I'd like to propose that we accept these, but I would like to comment on Yasin's question. I mean, I think the usual process is that you ask the authority, or the clerk asks the authority to grant a leave of absence, because I mean that could include illness, maternity leave, mental health issues or whatever. And I think if we do that in a formal process, it is then noted, and then there can't be any comment later why hasn't X or Y turned up for a few meetings. Well, actually, because we know that person, as in this case, maternity leave. I mean, it should be respected, and we should note it, and we should make it very explicit. We are granting that leave of absence, I think, rather than expecting the person to almost be pressurised into doing anything. Because I mean, the substitution arrangements are okay, but if we can't find somebody where the person can be put under pressure, I think we should just formally do it, time limited or whatever we think is appropriate, and then revisit it. But I think if we can go through that as a process, if we ever need to, for any related event, they can speak to the clerk about it. I think the way to do it is fully minuted and then auditable.
I think thank you, Councillor, I appreciate that. I think the reason it's more informally dealt with at the moment is sometimes it involves sensitive information that you wouldn't want to discuss at a public meeting. The purpose of the provisions in the Constitution is that I can take the matter further with the unitary authorities if I needed to. And obviously when there's a good reason for the absence, whether it be maternity, illness or some other good reason, then it would go, I wouldn't even consider raising it with the unitary authority. So as long as I'm made aware, I'm comfortable. But if the fire authority members want to be made aware more formally, I'd have to work out how to do that while respecting privacy.
Perhaps it's for those people who are group leaders to liaise with the individual and then contact the clerk for a confidential discussion about the situation before going back to the authority.
Thank you.
Okay, so with potentially adding something along those lines, are you happy to support this? Can I see anybody who'd like to? No. Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you, Ruth. And can I see anybody against it? Any abstention? And those in favour? That's everyone. Yeah. Thank you. And the next one, I think, is yours, Angie.
Sorry, just before Angie presents the paper, can I just highlight one thing to members? You will notice at the end of the paper that there are several appendices. Appendices 3 and 5 are exempt. They are confidential documents, both comprising advice. One is legal advice and one is other advice. They cannot be discussed in this public forum. So if members want to discuss those two appendices, we will have to go into exempt session. So I just wanted to make sure the conversation didn't stray into that area. Members are, of course, able to ask questions about those two appendices, but if you could first ask that we go into exempt session, then I will arrange that. We can propose it.
On that basis then, Madam Clerk, shall I suggest that we actually do item 19 and then item 21 and then do item 18 afterwards? If we have to do that, we haven't got to come in and out.
I think for report 19, Simon Chilton has confirmed to me that in view of the length of time this meeting has taken, it's for information only. He wasn't intending to formally present that report. So it was just in case members had any questions about the service
Number 21 is quite easy as well, isn't it?
And 21 is just the date of the next meeting.
So we should have done those and then move on to Angie, should we do
yes,
that?
okay. So with the service roundup, Chair, shall we deal with that first? So that report is number 19.
So would you like to do that then, 19?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, the report in front of you is the service roundup. You'll be familiar with the format of that. It's not my intention to go through with you the detail of this report. It has been offered 4 questions. I've not received any questions on the report itself, but I'll just open it up if there are any queries or questions from members prior to going to the recommendation, which is to note the report. Thank you.
Nobody seems to be indicating. No? Okay, well, that's just an item for information, that's just for noting then. So thank you, Simon. In that case, I think that covers those.
Item 21.
Item 21 is the date of the next meeting, and that will be the AGM. That's on the 22nd of June at 2 o'clock, and we're visiting Weston this time. So hopefully it'll be a nice, sunny, warm day. Yes. We have heard you, Ruth. Okay. Are you not coming to Weston? No. Heckle. Yes, the Chief Officer has said he's coming to the next one so he can sit and heckle us. Okay. Right, so item 22, exclusion of the press and public. Sorry?
So, Chair, what I propose we do with this paper, most of it is for public scrutiny, and so most of this immediate detriment paper should be discussed in open session. And then if and when we feel the need to go into exempt session to discuss perhaps legal advice, then we can close the session down and have that conversation without the camera running. So I think at this stage, Angie would be happy to start opening the report and dealing with the discussion in open session.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise that these discussions are sort of technically complex and the terminology is often opaque when we're talking about pensions. So I will, as I usually do, sort of walk you through the paper. And I've also got Andy Cunningham here today, who is our sort of pension technical kind of specialist. So please throw technical questions to him. And he is also our independent chair of the LPB, so can also talk about the role of the local pension board and its element in making kind of recommendations. So, and also before I start, I did kind of notice this morning that there is a typo in the last bullet of paragraph 5.2 on page 308, where it gives a date of the 6th of April 2002. That should read the 6th of April 2022. So members, this is a paper coming to you for decision in respect of immediate detriment, and in particular returning to reconsider the adoption of the FBU and LGA MOU and framework at this time. Members will recall from the times that we've discussed this before that the term immediate detriment refers to the group of people who are immediately impacted by the outcome of the legal cases on age discrimination, but are currently needing to wait until a government resolution in 2023. So the group who are considered to be immediately impacted by that are primarily those retiring before 2023 and those who are already retired. So that's the group we're talking about when we refer to immediate detriment. And with reference to the FBU, LGA, MOU and framework that we discussed at the last meeting in December and is reattached for you at Appendix 1, you will recall that this MOU and framework seeks to extend what the Fire Authority is already doing in respect of immediate detriment, which is allowing those coming up to retire to access the lump sum and the annual payments under the 92 scheme. And it seeks to resolve also issues for retirees, so those people who have already retired, and also to resolve a wider range of matters. So not just the pension payments, but also some of the other consequential impacts around tax charges and interest payments. And it also introduces a 62-day processing timetable for processing all immediate detriment cases. And your decision at the December meeting was to defer adoption of that MOU and framework pending further information, in particular on tax and funding. So what I will now do is just do a summary of where it seems to be a sort of sensible start to talk about what hasn't changed since the last Fire Authority meeting, and then to go on to what has changed since the Fire Authority meeting, and in particular the recommendation coming to you from the local pension board, after which I will then go through the recommendations, because I think they will probably make more sense once I've talked through the paper. So in terms of what hasn't changed since the December Fire Authority, is that for clarity, it remains the case that impacted firefighters, so those coming up for retirement and those who are already retired, will be in receipt of a pension. And they will be in receipt of an annual pension and a lump sum, and examples of the figures that are involved in that and currently received are set out in the paper at paragraph 5.32. So therefore, this issue is not meaning staff are being left with no pension, but it's about enhancing that in order for them to receive the 92 scheme amounts together with any compensatory payments in respect of any tax charges and interest arising. It also remains the case that the government are committed to full remedy on or before October 23. which is described as remedying all matters for all impacted and with backdating. So therefore, this is in some respects a timing issue, and for the Fire Authority to decide whether and to what extent it will seek to remedy these matters before the legislation in 2023. It also remains the case, as set out in Section 7 of the report, that fire and rescue authorities retain the power to make immediate detriment payments under the Equality Act. But it also remains the case that the issues we talked about in December around the Home Office and the Treasury position is that they are of the view that that power doesn't reconcile issues around tax and contributions, and their advice remains not to process immediate detriment before the legislation is in place. And then the Home Office position, which followed that, is that if, as employers and scheme managers, you do that, there are aspects of the costs which are set out in the last bullet point on 3.2, which will now not be funded and would fall to local budgets. And those costs which may fall to local budgets, as indicated, are primarily around the administration costs and also the compensatory costs. And a large kind of aspect of that refers to that at the moment, a number of the payments, in particular for those who are retiring, and therefore whilst you're also trying to sort out a lot of arrears payments, would currently be considered unauthorised payments under the current tax legislation. And what is proposed in the MOU is that fire authorities would compensate for those unauthorised tax payments which would otherwise be payable by those scheme members. Now, unauthorised tax charges, which I set out in Appendix 4, are complex, as they would be. It's around kind of tax, but are potentially significant. They are up to 55% of whatever the payment is that is unauthorised. So these are potentially large payments depending on what the amounts involved are. It's also still the case that the LGA and FBU MOU and framework, which you looked at in December, is unchanged. And therefore, it continues to require fire and rescue authorities to compensate employees for those unauthorised tax charges in advance of the legislation. And it also still has that time frame that I talked about, which is the 62 kind of days. And our pension administrators continue to indicate that they can't achieve that timescale for all cases. And I understand that that remains the case with a number of our national pension administrators. But it also equally remains the case that this is an important issue to our staff, both past and present. And the FBU national position, it continues to support MOU adoption, and there remains a risk of legal claims if that framework is not adopted. And the legal claims would also be funded from local budgets. And it is also I think, has been key to employee relations and those staff that the Fire Authority, despite the position of Home Office and Her Majesty's Treasury, have continued to process, have agreed to continue process immediate detriment for those who are coming up to retirement in respect of the lump sum and the annual amount. And as outlined on page 309 of your report, 15 people have been able to retire under those 92 scheme terms. Another 6 are under consideration. And I think this has been significant around employee relations and also risk management. Also confirm that we have not received any legal claims in respect of immediate detriment. So therefore, turning to what has changed since December, you will see in your papers that the further guidance and advice has been sought on the tax implications of immediate detriment by both SAB, and also, which is the letter on Appendix 2, which is the Scheme Advisory Board, and also Myself and the technical group have joined a tax consortium with another 14 fire and rescue services, which is seeking specialist advice on this direct from the tax office. However, no responses or further clarity have yet been received by either SAB or our tax specialist at this time from HMT or HMRC. LGA have also advised fire and rescue authorities that they have approached the FBU to discuss whether there is any need to amend the MOU and framework to help overcome the difficulties that fire and rescue authorities may currently be having with adopting the MOU, and in particular in light of those emerging developments around tax and funding. But no further information has been provided at this point about what is being discussed, a progress of that, or the timetable, and therefore the MOU, as I've described, remains unchanged. The LGA, whilst also confirming the legal basis for payments, remains valid, and there's more detail in that in the exempt paper that you have in Appendix 3, have also recognised that due to the Home Office position, fire and rescue authorities are faced with significant financial risk, in particular in terms of the tax implications and costs around those. The LGA have also recently advised that following the passing of a finance bill in April this year, they anticipate that legislation to deal with the tax elements of remedy will be in place on or by autumn 2020. Now that would be significant because the indications are that this would make payments which would currently be unauthorised and then sort of generate those unauthorised tax payments would become authorised for the purposes of remedy. So therefore the charges would not be incurred and therefore would not need to be compensated for. It also remains very difficult to calculate the financial exposure that the authority would be exposed to if it adopted in full the MOU and the framework. However, the technical kind of working group that I lead are working with another service that have developed a ready reckoner to try and calculate the financial implications, and we are currently considering and testing that with a view to adoption, but it is not yet ready for our use. And finally, which is the reason for the paper returning to Fire Authority at this point, LPB, so your local pension board, considered this matter in February 2022. And the LPB have an advisory role to the Fire and Rescue Authority as a scheme manager with reference to compliance. But they don't consider financials and they don't consider resourcing implications. So the LPB consists of two scheme manager representatives, which is Councillor Brown and Councillor Windows, and two employee reps, so sort of, I suppose, the scheme member reps, which is, in our case, two FBU members, and also an independent chair who I have introduced as Andy. And their decision was to recommend that the Fire Authority reconsider adoption of the MOU at this point. And the reasons for that recommendation are outlined in paragraph 5.6 and 5.7 of your report. And of course, Councillor Brown and Councillor Windows are here today to expand on that. Those scheme members and employee reps have also had the opportunity, had they have wished to present a public access statement today. The LPB recommendations are not binding on the Fire Authority, but of course it is important that you pay them with due regard and seek to understand the rationale, as they are your advisors in terms of compliance matters. And it's also important to note that as this is a dynamic situation, the developments that I've just spoken about in terms of the Finance Act and the potential revision of the MOU came after the LPB meeting. So finally, turning to financial implications, as previously outlined, the administrative costs of the current immediate detriment processing, so that's just forthcoming retirees and just in respect of the lump sum and the annual amounts, I think will be covered by the administrative grant that we receive from government. in particular because the indication is that we will receive a grant again for 2023 and of the same level that we received in this year. What would be unfunded if you take a decision to adopt the MOU and framework would be the administrative costs of processing, in particular that retiree group, which is a group of around 32, which is indicated in the paper as 55,000. And then the larger amount would be in respect to what they call the compensatory payments. So that is the payments that would need to be made by the authority in respect of interest that might be due. And as I've indicated, those unauthorised tax charges, which would be applied to a number of aspects of the payments. They may also be applied to the contributions and moving the contributions from the 15 scheme back to the 92 scheme. And as I have previously outlined, the level of those compensation payments will be more for retirees because you are trying to roll back and pay arrears for, in some cases, quite significant periods and from over 12 months ago. Whereas when you're remedying the people kind of going forward, you're not sort of dealing with arrears because you're kind of dealing with the issues now before they retire. As an illustration, the other service that I have talked about who are kind of developing this Ready Reckoner have recently used that to calculate the costs of MOU adoption within their service. It is a service of a similar size and with a similar number of retirees. And their calculations for ID processing is that the cost to adopt the MOU in respect to forthcoming retirees is around 30,000, but that rises to up to 300,000 to process the retired group, in particular because of those unauthorised tax charges at up to 55% of whatever the payment is plus sanctions. And once verified with that Ready Reckoner, I will of course be using that to calculate our amounts with Avon Fire and be able to report back the quantum and the financial exposure of MOU adoption to the Fire Authority. As I've outlined in the paper, there is a contingency and a pension reserve. They are non-recurrent, and the pension reserve is 578,000. But it is a reserve for all pension matters. So therefore, it in particular covers ill health retirements where we need to make payments, where we have more ill health retirements in a year above the estimated number. And therefore, using that pension reserve for the MOU kind of adoption potentially raises the risk of a significant revenue pressure on other budgets in respect to pensions. So I'll now read out the recommendations. I hope, as I say, I know it's a very technical matter, but it helps to walk you through the paper in that way. So I will now just refer to the recommendations. So the first one is to note the updates since the 15th of December Fire Authority meeting, those including Appendix 2, which is the Scheme Advisory Board letter to Treasury, Appendix 3, which is that LGA legal advice which is exempt, and also Appendix 5, which is the national picture of what other fire and rescue services within the consortium are doing, which is also exempt. To consider the recommendations which have been made by the local pension board at their February 22 meeting regarding immediate detriment and MOU and framework adoption. As I say, we have members of the local pension board here today. Consider, which is my recommendation, to defer a decision on formally and fully adopting the MOU. So that's not ever, it's just not yet. And if that decision is made, to decide when and under what circumstances this matter should be referred back to the authority for further consideration. And there my suggestion is that unless there are amendments to the MOU or framework in the interim, that reconsideration should be autumn 22, when the tax legislation is expected to change and substantively reduce the financial risk arising from MOU framework adoption. However, As I say, despite the kind of position without HMT and Home Office, it remains my recommendation to continue processing immediate detriment for forthcoming retirees under the arrangements agreed by the Fire Authority in June. That's both in terms of the differential in their kind of costs, and also that these staff are making decisions based on these statements around retirement now, whereas our retirees have made the decision to retire based on what their estimates were at that kind of point. And you'll also note that the technical group have recently been able to extend the scope of that group to include those with pension contribution holidays, and that has enabled currently around another 2 people to come into scope to retire on that basis. And then finally, in our ongoing preparation for future adoption of the MOU framework before 2023, which is the government resolution, to extend until further notice the current instruction to the pension administrators to run dual estimates for retiring scheme members who have given notice but are currently outside of ID processing due to complexities. So this is that we still have some people who are too complicated, either because they have kind of divorce sharing orders, etc. So this is to enable them to see what they would get if we were able to process them, because as and when we can without complexity, in the same way we have done with pension contributions holidays, we can then bring them into the frame. And the second one is to continue to collate the data which will be needed to run estimates for the already retired staff as described by the framework. So as much as we can, and also in view of the pension administrators resourcing that I have outlined, to try and get ahead with the data collection of the retirees for the point as and when the Fire Authority decide to adopt the MOU and the framework. So happy to take questions, Chair. I just wonder whether in advance of that it might be good to invite the LPB scheme manager representatives to speak with it in terms of their kind of recommendations, the repetition of the LPB, and also for the LPB chair to comment.
I think that would be very useful.
Councillor Brown has his hand up.
Sorry. Yes.
Thanks for that, Angie. I have to help myself as the member who is referred to in 5.7 as dissenting from the recommendation made by the board. And the reason that I gave at that point was that the situation had not become significantly clearer since December. Further clarity would still be required on key issues before I feel we could adopt the MOU. I think Angie has laid the situation out very clearly with an additional level of information for the Fire Authority with regards to costs that weren't part of our consideration at the local pension board. It's regrettable that the government is, not answering requests for, further information, further advice, withdrawn advice. It makes things much more complicated than it needs to be. And I think we're right to prep the ground for moving towards the MOU framework if we can. But the situation that we're in is, I feel, the most prudent and as much as we've taken a risk-managed approach to the situation. We're trying to process as many ID claims as we can, and we've extended that slightly with the contribution holiday cases. But the risks of moving to the MOU, I feel, are too great for the authority to bear financially, particularly. So I think the right and prudent approach at the moment is to continue on the current approach that we've got.
Councillor Windows.
Thank you, Chair. I just feel at this point that I should say that when it came to the meeting, I took a decision on the information I had at that time. Since then, I've had reason to reconsider my decision to support it due to the fact that it will put the authority in a very difficult position, or it could do. It's all potential. It's a very difficult and complex subject. Having been involved in it for quite a long time, I'm still completely bewildered by it all. I have to say that. But I do know that it could put us in a very difficult position financially. I do think that the government is trying to shirk its responsibilities as far as paying for its past mistakes. I can recall going to up to the Midlands, to the post house up near West Bromwich in 1977, before anybody else here was born, because there was a discussion then on the future of pensions, how the government was going to deal with the shortfall. I don't think the successive governments have done a very good job on it, but I don't feel that the Fire Authority should be having to foot the bill. So I've reconsidered my decision, and I'm happy to support everything that has been proposed in this particular item.
Thank you, Councillor Windows. That's very helpful. Is Mr. Mason's?
No, it's Andy Cunningham.
Sorry, I thought it wasn't. I had a list of names and it was the wrong one. I'm sorry, Mr. Cunningham. Would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I don't probably have too much more to add. I think it's probably just largely echoing the same points. I think it's probably frustrating for all concerned that the government hasn't put in place legislation much earlier. It doesn't serve anybody's interest that legislation is taking so long. I think everybody wants the same outcome here. They want it to be corrected. So we are in a difficult position. But because we are in that position, I think the route to complete compliance is unclear, and that's why we've been asked to take a sort of balance of risks approach. So whilst sort of noting and respecting the board members' decisions about recommending adoption of the MOU, my personal opinion is that the balance of risks is to not adopt at this moment in time and to defer adoption until further information is in place. In particular, virtually all the issues relate to tax, and whilst it's been unhelpful, the government hasn't responded because that is the position that we find ourselves in. It feels imprudent to move ahead from a compliance perspective, also noting the financial aspects as well. And probably just final point really is just to reiterate that this is very much a timing point. Those tax issues are only caused by adopting early. From a member's perspective, they will still receive the same benefits, just later than they would like. So we're just talking about delaying when they would receive them. But by delaying it, you avoid the tax issues as they appear at the moment. So that's just so it's largely echoing other points, but just sort of clarifying, I guess, how I see it from my perspective.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any other comments on this? Can't see anybody. Given how complicated this is, can we recap on exactly what we are going to vote on?
Oh, sorry, thank you. It's bound to happen. It's like being on mute, isn't it, in Zoom? It's bound to happen at least once. So the first one is just for noting. So that's to note the updates since the 15th of December Fire Authority meeting, and specifically the ones at Appendix 2, 3 and 5. The second one is to consider the recommendation made by the local pension board at their February 22 meeting regarding ID and MOU framework. So that's a consideration of what the LPB recommendation was. Having considered those updates and also the recommendation, my recommendation is to continue to defer a decision on formally and fully adopting the MOU. So what that means is that your decision is not to adopt the MOU at this point. If that is your decision, to decide when and under what circumstances you would like the matter to come back to the Fire Authority for your consideration. And my suggestion there is that unless there are amendments to the MOU framework in the interim, that this reconsideration by the Fire Authority should be in autumn 22, when the tax legislation is expected to change and substantively reduce the financial risk arising as described. My recommendation is, however, to continue to process immediate detriment cases for forthcoming retirees, which is what you have been doing since June. And I've described the reasons why I think that that is important in terms of risk management and also exposes you to less financial risk. And then the final parts are more around continuing to prepare for MOU adoption, which is in particular to collate the data needed to run estimates for those already retired staff, so that at which point you make a decision to adopt the MOU, we are ahead of that in terms of the pressures on our pension administrator. So I hope that clarifies. I do know it's a technically complex issue, isn't it?
It's definitely complex, and obviously it does impact on people. So
yes, exactly.
That's a real issue for us. But I think that's been helpful, Andy, to sum that up. So essentially, from what I've taken from what you've said, is that we need to vote on whether to defer the decision or not, as the first part of it.
I think so. Perhaps Amanda could help us take us through the recommendations and the voting.
I was going to propose the opposite, actually. I was going to propose that, because I'm not hearing any members voice any concerns, I was going to propose that we take the recommendations en bloc and vote on them, but that would make more sense to me.
Perfectly happy with that, Clark.
I am too.
Unless any members, sorry, I should just provide the option. Any members got any objection to that approach?
Nobody had indicated previously.
No? Okay.
I think that's the easiest way forward.
So if we could just have a proposer, please, for all the recommendations.
Are you
so
proposing?
We've got two. So
Thank
we've
you.
got
That's great.
Councillor Davies and Councillor Hopkinson seconding.
Good. Great. So the proposal is that we take all the recommendations en bloc. And that seems very sensible to me. So can I see anybody against? Any abstentions? And those in favour? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you.
I think Mick has planned this agenda so that he can go out remembering just how long Fire Authority meetings can take. Right. Okay. So the next bit, coming up towards the end, item 22 is the exclusion of the press and public. And to resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Is everybody happy with that? Right, are you proposing? Thank you. Seconder? Lovely, thank you. I was just going to say, is everybody in favour? Save me going through it all over again. Yep, good, that's carried. Thank you.